Now sizobheka lana besisabhizi the uniqueness of carbon, ukuthi carbon kwamanye ama elements alapho ku periodic table yini into eyenza ukuthi ibe unique. Okokuqala, it can form bonds between a long chain of carbon. It can form a long chains of carbon. Two, ingakwazi ukuthi it form a double bond between carbon, njengoba sibonile. Three, iyakha ne triple bonds between carbon. Iyakwazi ukuthi yakhe triple bond, kodwa sikhumbule ukuthi labo bewu-3 abawu-2 bawo-pi bonds, ngoba phela isuke ibonde ngendlela engathandi ngayo, ngendlela strenuous. So ibonda ngaleyo ndlela about 2 pi bond, bese kuba nale strong sigma bond. We know that uma sine triple bond between carbon, hydrogen, then these lezi ezimbili, lena iyayilapha phezulu nalena ilapha naphansi ikhombe ngale ndlela, bese ke yase iyakha ibond la, yase ifoma that bond njengoba sibonile ngaphambilini. And this bond, this is a pi bond, pi ababili abaphakathi abafake isigma ngaphakathi. So the pi bond is a weak bond because ama electrons ize lana, kodwa awamanga kahle, awabondanga kahle ngoba of position ye orbital. So the position yayo is not aimanga favorably because there are no other elements that can form a bond. So it forms a pi bond. Then another uniqueness of carbon, the carbon can form a bond with elements, a lot of elements, halogens like iodine, bromine, chlorine, fluorine. It can even form a bond with oxygen, and can even form a bond with other elements. So we call that process catenation. We call it a catenation. Now, having said that, we can talk of in most common compounds, carbon iyakwazi ukuthi iyakhe ibond ne-hydrogen. So njengoba leso structure esisibiza sithi i-carbon, i-hydrogen kuhlangene konke, sesibiza sesingathi thina ama-hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons, kumele sikhulume ngama-hydrocarbons. These are hydrocarbons. So yes, negama hydrocarbon, which means a compound and hydrogen and carbon. So we call it hydrocarbon. Now, a hydrocarbon is into two groups. Scenario le enama hydrocarbon, which is saturated. Obviously, if it's saturated, then we have an unsaturated. This is saturated hydrocarbon, and the other one is unsaturated hydrocarbon. Ama-saturated hydrocarbon abizwa kuthiwa yini na? Kuthiwa ama-alkanes. These are saturated hydrocarbon. Siyeza ukuthi why but saturated. Ama-unsaturated hydrocarbon kubizwa kuthiwa yini lokho na? Ama-alkenes and alkynes. These are unsaturated hydrocarbon. Now, unsaturated yenjani na? Ake sithathe nansi carbon, ni carbon nasithathe kanje. Kune hydrogen la, hydrogen la. Layer carbon bond is a sigma bond, very strong bond. So now, uma ubuka la sine structure lesi esinje. Hence I said hydrocarbon. Sinabo carbon, nabo hydrogen belana. Now mawubuka la sino carbon ababili nabo hydrogen abawu6. Ake siye kwi unsaturated. Bese ngiyayichaza ke ukuthi kanjani sithi saturated and unsaturated. Ake sithathe le enabo double bond between carbon. Double bond between carbon. Ungakhohlwa lenye leya bond, it's a pi bond. Njengoba kuyi pi bond, uma kwenzeka kuqhamuka ihydrogen, mhlambe ihydrogen lento hydrogen gas ifika ize la izo attack le part le ngoba vele le bond lena it's a weak bond. And then bond eyakheke la ekuyi pi, it's unfavorable. Uma ungakhumbula le yanto ngikhulume ngathi uma kusiba nento enjena, masiba nento enjena sithi iba into enjena, nansi enye carbon nayo into enjena, iyakhe ibond la kwaba yi-sigma le, kwangena i-hydrogen na iyakhe ibond, kwangena ne-hydrogen la iyakha ibond, nalana kwangena i-hydrogen. Kwasho ukuthi manje ayisakwazi manje ukufoma ibond la, i-electron eyodwa bese ke ifoma ibond lena. Ayithandi ukuthi ifome kanjena kodwa ngenxa ukuthi phela kuyashoda, ikumele kuyashoda kuthola o-hydrogen noma ama-halogens. Siyasweka ama-halogens, asikhulume nje nge-hydrogen. Ayisakwazi ukuthi bese ima ngale simo. So mewuthatha le drawing siletha la sidweba ngale ndlela lena, siyathola ukuthi iba ayile ndlela. So this is a pi bond. So mokuza i-hydrogen siyazi ukuthi ine-electron eyodwa, nalenye i-hydrogen ine-electron eyodwa. So igcwele i-energy level yayo. So zibonde zanikeza i-covalent bond. So ke manje lena imele le electron iqhamuka la, lona iqhamele le electron iqhamuka la. So ukuze sibe ibe yinhle ibukeke bese nesibeke kanje to show that ukuthi kune bond la. Uma isondela laphana kwenzekani i-hydrogen, kuzobreakeka lo pi bond ngoba vele awumanga kahle, bese lo hydrogen lo ezela nalo hydrogen lo abondela. So you can still add hydrogen as long as in a double bond between carbon. Angiphinde futhi, as long as in a double bond between carbon, it means one of the bonds, that is a pi bond, leyo bond inama electrons angabambekanga ngqi. Ake ngisho ngesingisi, it has got a delocalized electrons. Delocalized kusho ukuthi into ongazi ukuthi ibhayiswe kuphi, isendaweni ilana nje ngoba phela ibond yakhona ayikho strong. So mekufika i-hydrogen iyakwazi ukuthi break le bond, you can still add o-hydrogen amabili. Now ake siye kwi-saturation, sichaze saturation. Uma uthatha ushukela ufake emanzini, uhlala ugovuza, ubona lo yashukela uyaphela uyancibilika emanzini, uthela omunye ushukela ugovuza uyancibilika emanzini, uthela omunye ushukela ugovuza, kuyofika lapha mawuthi uyagovuza uthi uyastera, ngesingisi kuthiwa stera, you stare. Ngale nkathi ugovuza bese uthola ukuthi ushukela awusancibiliki. Kusho ukuthi phela ushukela manje laphana emanzini sewugcwele manje amanzi lawana, that solution seyigcwele ushukela sokuhlangene, ayisakwazi manje ukuncibilika. Sesithi lawo manzi have reached a saturation point, agcwele, you can no longer add ushukela kulawo manzi. Likhona netiye elinjalo abantu okuvesena thela iy'puni ekhaphini engaka, thela iy'puni eziwu-15, athi uyagovuza ubone ngaphansi ngazathi yi-syrup. Kusho ukuthi phela itiye lakhe has reached a saturation point. Uma kwenzeka, siya kwisingisi manje, uma kwenzeka uyatadisha ubusuku bonke, bese ufika lapha sowubona khona ukuthi ingqondo ayisakwazi ukwamukela, awusakwazi uku-edeka la engqondweni. noma ngathi 7 plus 7 u14 wena uthi cha u77 nawe uyabona ukuthi hayi ikhona manje into akusakhali kahle akusashayi kahle ingoba ingqondo yakho seyigcwele asekho isidingo sokuthi uhlale utadishe because your mind or your brain is saturated. So ngamanye amazwi uma is saturated like an alkane ayisekho double bond le awusekho triple bond you can no longer add saturation. So alkanes are saturated. They are saturated. Why? Simply because you can no longer add kuwona. Ngamanye amazwi i-addition iyenzeka kuphi na uma sine triple bond. Sine triple bond between carbon noma kunani kune double bond between carbon. I-addition iyenzeka uma kunjalo. Triple bond, triple bond, these are alkynes. Alkynes. Angivumele ukuthi ngithi ngingathi nje triple bond ngime kanjalo ngithi triple bond between carbon. Alkynes. Lezi sinama double bond between carbon siwabiza sithi yini na? Alkanes. Alkanes. So ngamanye amazwi ama-alkynes sesidlala ke manje umdlalo we-science sesidlalela umdlalo we-science. Ama-alkynes bakwethu uma une-alkyne si-triple bond u-eda u-H2 uya-edeka lo H2 uzo-edeka la kukhona khona ama-pi bond. In our case upi ungaphezulu nomunye upi ungaphansi ngisho i-pi bond angisho lo pi lo ucabangayo abanye amathi sethi ngikhuluma ngani pi bond engaphezulu nenye ngaphansi. So lo hydrogen uzoya either ngaphezulu noma ngaphansi asise ngaphezulu sesizoba nani na sesizoba no C soku double bond hydrogen na baya labo hydrogen no H2 sebe edeke ngaphezulu sesinani na sinento nje yabona. You can add kuma alkynes. More add alkynes, you add hydrogen kuma alkynes. When you add hydrogen, sengikhulumela nje phambili, i-process yoku add kwe hydrogen sibiza sithi it's hydrogenation. When you add hydrogen, we call that process hydrogenation. Kusho ukuthi wena uletha isizwe so hydrogen. Yezwa nation. Uletha isizwe sani na so hydrogen lethi yani sizwe yani kwe hydrogen yani uletha hydrogen lana so that is the process known as hydrogenation. When you add hydrogen kuma alkynes you add hydrogen kuma alkynes you form what yini say nama double bonds alkanes mina ngibhale kabi ngathi alkanes la instead of what alkenes and alkyne. Alkene in a double bond between carbon, alkyne in a triple bond between carbon. So you have alkyne unga add hydrogen you form an alkene. Ungabuya yini u-ede yini kwi-alkene? Yebo, ngoba kunalo ya pi bond osele unga-eda u-hydrogen. Hey wena, what do you form? So kuzoba yini na? Kuzoba u-C, u-H laphana, u-H. Nakuya ilabo H laba sebengena lapha ngaphansi so khona laba u-H. So kuyini lena na? So kuyi-alkane. I-alkane usenga-eda yini la? Ngeke usa-eda. Yikho lokusithi ama-alkanes are saturated ngoba awusakwazi uku-eda kuma-alkanes. I-reaction enga-undergo ama-alkanes it's any other reaction save for addition. You cannot add. Ngamanye amazwi inga-reacta nanoma yikanjani kodwa into engeke iyenze ukuthi u-ede kuma-alkanes. Why ungeke u-ede kuma-alkanes? Yingoba ama-alkanes are saturated. So we call this saturated hydrocarbons. So ke lezi ezi-unsaturated yingoba zinabo-pi bond. Saturated, unsaturated. These are unsaturated. You can still add. This leads me to check out more qhathanisa i-alkynes and alkenes. Yipi e-reacta kakhulu kunenye? Yipi esheshe react? Yipi esheshe yamukele? Mawufaka hydrogen. Mawufaka hydrogen laphana kwi-alkyne noma ku-alkene. Ikuphi lapha edeka kalula khona? Ikwi-alkynes. Ama-alkynes, why? Ngoba anabo-pi bond ababili. Angiphinde futhi. Why alkynes? Yingoba banabo-pi bond ababili. Labo-pi bond will are between carbon. So, your alkyne. I-alkyne is more reactive than alkenes. Why they are more reactive? It's simply because they've got 2 pi bond between carbon. Alkenes, 1 pi. So this is more reactive than alkenes. Zireacta kalula lezi ngoba kunabo pi bond abaningi. Kune part inama electrons awu-4 delocalized, awu-2 kulena e-pi bond engaphansi, ayi-2 kuleya pi bond engaphezulu. So they are more reactive. More reactive than alkenes. Ama-alkenes ke nawo mawaqhathanisa nama-alkanes are more reactive. When you compare them with alkanes, relative to alkanes, I like that word. When you compare relativity, relative to alkanes, asithi isihlobo bakwethu mesti relative. Wena socabanga u-auntie, ucabanga umamkhulu, ucabanga umamncane, ubaba umncane. Relativity sikhuluma ngokuthi mawuqhathanisa ama-alkenes nama-alkanes. Alkenes are more reactive than alkanes. Abanye abantu mebedefine ama-alkanes bathi ama-alkanes are relatively unreactive. It does not mean ama-alkanes are unreactive, but when you compare them with alkenes, they are unreactive. These are more reactive than this. These are less reactive than this. These are relatively unreactive. So it's unreactive than alkynes and alkenes. But as a reactive kakulu, I'm alkynes. Now with all this information, we need now to have abantu be-science bafuna indlela yokuthi njengoba i-carbon iyakha i-structures eziningi kanje, akube nendlela-ke yokunameisha ama-structures. Sibe nendlela yokunameisha ama-structures. So sesiyongena manje, sesingena the naming of organic compounds.